Sean Diddy Combs exploded in a fit of rage, suddenly leaping over the courtroom railing and brutally attacking Federal Judge Aoin Subramonian right in the middle of a packed courtroom. He grabbed the judge by the neck and slammed his head against the edge of the bench, over and over, until Subramonian lost consciousness and died within just 3 short minutes. Federal officers and court security quickly subdued Diddy. But what happened that day couldn't simply be dismissed as a moment of lost control. The real question is, why would a man already facing serious criminal charges suddenly murder a judge in front of everyone? Could there have been something hidden in those classified documents that triggered Diddy to snap, turning him into a man unrecognizable, stripped of humanity? Part 1. The origins of the incident. It all began on the morning of June 4th. The area around the federal courthouse at 500 Pearl Street was partially cordoned off by police. Reporters lined the sidewalks, their cameras trained on the courthouse doors. From the very start, the case against Sean Combs, better known to the world as Diddy, had attracted massive international attention. Yet, up to that moment, everything remained a complicated legal proceeding, showing no signs of spiraling out of control. At exactly 9 a.m., the trial entered its 13th day. Leading Diddy's defense was a 4-member legal team, headed by Evan Marino, a seasoned criminal lawyer with a reputation for defending high-profile controversial clients. Diddy arrived on time, escorted by 2 court officers. His appearance had clearly changed. He looked thinner, his skin pale, his face drained of emotion. On the other side of the courtroom stood the prosecution, led by Amy Roth from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Known for her sharp questioning and aggressive courtroom style, Roth had been instrumental in building the entire case. The charges against Combs were staggering, far beyond simple assault. They included human trafficking, operating illegal interstate enterprises, money laundering, sexual abuse, and witness intimidation. The case file stretched over 1,400 pages, with more than 60 witnesses, some of whom had already testified, others still waiting for their turn. The star witness that day was Kareem Big K Davis, a former bodyguard who had worked for Diddy for over a decade. Davis was no stranger to run-ins with the law, having faced previous charges for gun possession, nightclub altercations, and alleged ties to Brooklyn-based gangs. But in early 2024, he struck a deal with the Department of Justice immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony. It was Davis who allegedly provided the damning recording proving that Diddy had personally ordered a victim to be transported across state lines, a direct violation of federal law. Presiding over the trial was Judge Arun Subramonian, the first Indian-American federal judge appointed to the Southern District of New York, one of the most influential courts in the nation. Subramonian was widely respected for his sharp mind, fairness, and refusal to bow to powerful interests without legal grounds. He had previously overseen major lawsuits, including the class action case against Johnson & Johnson and large-scale financial fraud trials. His reputation for integrity and transparency was a key reason people believed the trial would be fair. Subramonian refused to allow unverified documents into evidence and repeatedly reminded both sides not to turn the proceedings into a public spectacle. That morning, everything in the courtroom appeared calm. The media was fully present, security was tight, and Diddy sat quietly with his eyes cast down. When Judge Subramonian entered and called the session to order, no one could have guessed the chaos about to unfold. But there was one subtle detail that would only be noticed later. About 12 minutes after the trial began, Diddy began to sweat, not profusely, but enough to be noticed. A security officer behind him reported that his shirt began sticking to his back, despite the courtroom being kept at a cool 21 degrees Celsius. At the same moment, a court staffer delivered a sealed manila envelope to the judge. The court log marked a time, 9:19 a.m. The envelope was labeled Vulmer 9 DOJ Internal Clearance. It was a term no one had heard in any prior hearings, and it wasn't part of the official case file. Instantly, all eyes turned toward the mysterious yellow envelope. As always, Judge Subramonian made no statement to the press. He glanced at the envelope, nodded to the court clerk, and calmly announced a 15-minute recess to review the new information, though the contents were not revealed. An audio technician later reported that Subramonian made a rare mid-trial phone call to the Department of Justice to confirm authorization to use the materials. Meanwhile, Diddy's behavior grew stranger by the minute. A side camera caught him shaking his head repeatedly, unable to sit still. One witness recalled, "It looked like he was arguing with someone invisible." A legal clerk also overheard Diddy muttering, "It can't come out, not like this." At exactly 9:51 a.m., the session resumed. Judge Subramonian returned, carrying the envelope. Placing it on the bench, he addressed the court. "We will now disclose the contents of the document marked Vollmer. According to confirmation from the DOJ, a portion of the material has been partially declassified for investigative purposes. If there are no objections, I will read it aloud within the next 10 minutes. In that instant, everything unraveled. Diddy's head shot up, eyes wide with fear. His voice, though trembling, was loud and clear. "Don't open it. I swear, someone will die if you touch that." He repeated the warning 3 times. The third, nearly shouted, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. Subramonian remained composed. This court does not operate under threats. If the defendant has a valid objection, his attorney may submit it appropriately. Diddy's attorney, Evan Marino, quickly requested a recess for a psychological evaluation of his client. But Sub denied the motion, declaring, "The defendant is not currently exhibiting signs of being unfit to stand trial. The session will proceed." At 10:36 a.m., court officers brought the envelope to the bench. Subramonian took a pair of scissors and began cutting through the seal. No one could have imagined what would happen next. Part 2. Diddy snaps the moment. Judge Subramonian reached for the scissors to open the envelope. Diddy let out a blood-curdling scream, as though he were being strangled. The courtroom froze, unable to process what was happening. Suddenly, Diddy sprang from his seat, grabbed the microphone from the defendant's table, and hurled it directly at the prosecution bench. The loud clang echoed through the chamber like a lightning strike. What followed was beyond anyone's imagination. With the speed and precision of a trained athlete, Diddy vaulted over the courtroom barrier, completely catching the security officers off guard. All anyone could do was watch in shock as he charged toward the judge's bench. Without hesitation, he leaped, every movement eerily deliberate, as though driven by instinct or something far more disturbing. He carried no weapon. There was no sign this was premeditated. It all seemed to erupt from somewhere deep and uncontrollable. A court clerk later recalled, his face was ghostly pale, his eyes bulging, and his mouth was screaming words no one could understand. Diddy wrapped both hands around Judge Subramonian's neck from behind and yanked him backward out of his chair. Chaos erupted as screams filled the room, and security forces rushed to intervene. But it was already too late. Diddy slammed the judge to the floor, using his full body weight to drive Subramonian's head into the edge of the bench. Blood sprayed across the floor, staining the tiles red. The sound of the blows echoed through the room, harsh, rhythmic, and merciless. The judge was completely defenseless, unable to resist. One witness recalled, "He didn't scream. He didn't even struggle. It happened so fast, it was like he lost consciousness with the first blow." It wasn't until 3 officers managed to tackle Diddy to the ground that the brutal attack stopped. Yet even then, Diddy kept screaming, not words, but guttural, animal-like shrieks that sent chills through the room. By the time paramedics stormed into the courtroom, Subramonian had no detectable heartbeat. They performed CPR on the spot for 7 agonizing minutes, but it was too late. His death was confirmed at the scene. It was a moment unlike any other in modern American justice. The first time a federal judge had been killed in the middle of an active trial, and the perpetrator was the defendant himself. One eerie detail left everyone in disbelief. No one believed Diddy was truly aware of what he had done. Witnesses, from lawyers to court clerks and camera operators, insisted that his eyes were vacant, lifeless, as though some unseen force had taken control. It was like he wasn't looking at anyone. One observer said, "It was like he was talking to a ghost, only he could see." Even while handcuffed and dragged from the courtroom, Diddy kept muttering the same chilling words. "I had to do it. I had to. I had no other choice." No one could make sense of what he meant, but those words ignited wild speculation about what really triggered his violent outburst. Meanwhile, the envelope marked Vollmer 9 remained untouched on the bench, soaked in blood, yet completely sealed. No one dared approach it until the FBI arrived. A court officer later admitted that during the entire evacuation, no one would even look at the envelope, as if it carried some unseen curse. The first person to touch it had already paid with their life. The entire courthouse was thrown into lockdown. Adjacent. Part 3. Crime Scene Analysis, and Diddy's behavior as security officers escorted Diddy from the courtroom. The atmosphere on the 8th floor remained tense, thick with shock and fear. Whispers, hurried footsteps, and sharp commands filled the air, creating a scene of unprecedented chaos. The murder of a federal judge. Right inside the courtroom, in front of dozens of witnesses, prosecutors, lawyers, reporters, and ordinary citizens, was something never seen before in U.S. judicial history. Within 30 minutes, the FBI had sealed off the entire courtroom. Adjacent courtrooms were cleared. All personnel, from legal staff to security and journalists, were ordered to stay behind for immediate statements. Forensics teams and a special investigative unit were quickly deployed to the scene. But what investigators found went beyond the physical signs of violence. What truly stunned them was the way Diddy carried out the attack. Decisive, fast, and almost robotic, with no sign of hesitation or second thoughts. One witness described it perfectly. He charged in like he was being controlled. No looking around, no shouting, no hesitation. It was like a voice in his head gave a single command, and that disturbing detail was just the beginning of the FBI's deeper investigation. There was reason to consider that Diddy may have been under some form of neurological or psychological influence. That very afternoon, he underwent a blood test to screen for stimulants, sedatives, or any chemical agents that could alter mental states. The results found no trace of drugs, but his adrenaline levels were alarmingly high, several times above the average Ranger level typically seen in someone who had experienced extreme trauma or was locked in a fight-or-flight state. But what puzzled investigators was that this didn't look like a typical outburst of rage. Usually, anger is marked by prolonged yelling, wild eyes, and incoherent speech. But Diddy was the complete opposite. Surveillance footage showed him completely silent before the attack. He screamed only in the instant he lashed out, and then fell completely still as security restrained him. An FBI behavioral analyst remarked, "We're not ruling out the possibility that this was an instinctively triggered action, rather than one driven by conscious thought." In the interrogation room, Diddy refused to cooperate. He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't request a phone call, and ignored every question from investigators. For the first 3 hours, he repeated only one sentence: "I wasn't in control of it. That wasn't me." Psychiatrists explained that such a statement could come from two possibilities. Either it was a symptom of dissociative disorder, where the mind disconnects from physical actions, or it was a convenient way to deny responsibility. But Diddy's physical reactions, facial muscles, rapid heartbeat, and sweaty palms didn't match those of someone faking it. Adding to the mystery was his behavior on the morning of the murder. The prison staff assigned to escort him to court recalled he barely spoke a word the entire journey. Silent. No questions. No glances out the window. Just clenched fists and his head down. "I've escorted all kinds murderers, rapists, even drug lords," one officer shared. "But I've never seen someone so eerily calm." An internal investigation at the detention center revealed that Diddy had shown strange signs in the 3 nights before the trial. He couldn't sleep, paced endlessly in his cell, and sometimes spoke to himself for hours. During a surprise inspection, guards found his hands scratched and bleeding. Yet he refused any medical care or bandages. These behaviors only deepened suspicions that Diddy might have been psychologically unstable or under the influence of an unknown factor beyond his own awareness. Yet his medical history offered no explanation. A 2022 report confirmed he was mentally sound, not on psychiatric medication, and had no record of behavioral disorders. His family's reaction was heartbreaking. His mother, Janice Combs, broke down in tears when police delivered the news, repeating only one thing: "My son would never do something like that, lest someone forced him." His younger brother, Justin, also shared that just days before the incident, Diddy confided that he felt like he was being watched, and no longer felt in control of himself. Meanwhile, the crime scene remained sealed until forensic teams completed their investigation. Every piece of equipment, microphones, cameras, even the defendant's chair was thoroughly examined to check for hidden devices. Though nothing conclusive was found, irregular signals picked up by the courtroom's audio system raised concerns about potential external interference. This prompted a recommendation to widen the investigation. Security personnel present that morning were also interviewed. One officer near the judge's bench reported hearing a faint clicking sound like a switch or device being activated seconds before Diddy lunged forward. But amid the general courtroom noise, no one else clearly noticed it. With all these strange factors, the case was no longer a simple criminal matter. It evolved into a broad investigation of Diddy's mental state, behavioral patterns, and possible psychological influences. The FBI has yet to release a final conclusion, but in their internal report to the Department of Justice. The first line read, "This incident cannot be classified as a typical act of impulsive violence. Evidence pointed toward possible neurological interference or behavioral manipulation." Part 4. Emerging theories. As soon as evidence from the crime scene was reviewed, the FBI began piecing together the events to answer one haunting question. Why did Sean Combs, once a symbol of power in American culture, lose control so completely, as if reason abandoned him right in the middle of a trial? It's not an easy question. The deeper the investigation goes, the more complex and tangled the theories become, making the case harder to untangle. Hypothesis 1. Mental collapse from overwhelming pressure. This was the first theory considered. After years immersed in fame, power, and hidden secrets, perhaps Diddy finally cracked under the strain. This trial wasn't an ordinary legal process. It exposed a side of his life he'd spent years burying. Murmurs of abusive behavior, secret relationships, and scandals that the media had long suspected but never proven finally surfaced. For the first 12 days of the trial, Diddy barely spoke, sitting silently as former lovers, employees, bodyguards, and business partners described a darker, more intimidating version of him, a version far from the polished public image he had crafted over 3 decades. An FBI psychologist noted that for someone with Diddy's dominant personality, public humiliation and a total loss of control could trigger an emotional breakdown. Forced to sit silently while his name was dragged through the mud, combined with chronic insomnia, severe stress, and near-total isolation, his collapse may have been inevitable. When you take someone used to commanding hundreds and lock them in a room, stripped of defenses, forced to face himself, sooner or later, he'll explode. One lawyer explained. But if it was just a breakdown, how do you explain the terrifying precision, speed, and cold clarity of his attack? That's exactly what's troubling investigators. Hypothesis 2. Diddy was a pawn in a larger scheme. Once signs suggested his behavior went beyond emotional collapse, another theory emerged, that he was manipulated or coerced by an unseen hand. After all, who would want a federal judge dead in the middle of a trial unless it served powerful interests? Judge Subramanian was known for his integrity, determined to release any document crucial to justice. If someone knew that the evidence about to surface could shake major political or financial foundations, stopping him at any cost wouldn't be far-fetched. Where does that leave Diddy? Was he merely a pawn in a calculated plan, one link in a chain reaction? A close friend once recalled, he always feared betrayal. He used to say, "They'll break me before I can tell the truth." Dismissed as paranoia then. Those words now sound chillingly prophetic. If this theory holds, the goal wasn't to assassinate the judge, it was to disrupt the trial, to cause such shock that the proceedings would grind to a halt. And that's exactly what happened. After the incident, the trial froze. No one dared step back into that courtroom. It's uncertain if the remaining evidence will ever see daylight. Hypothesis 3. Undiagnosed neurological disorder, or psychological trauma. Less discussed but present theory in internal reports suggests that Diddy suffers from an undiagnosed mental disorder, perhaps a personality disorder, dissociation, or PTSD, though official medical records show no history. Multiple sources claim he underwent private treatment at a Miami mental health center in 2020, disguised as a rehab stay. A collaborator from his last music project before the case shared that Diddy often struggled with insomnia and sometimes disappeared for a week with no explanation. Once, I saw him stand by the window for 4 hours straight, saying nothing. "We didn't ask questions, he's the boss," they said. If these were signs of hidden mental illness, the courtroom attack may have been the breaking point, the eruption. After long suppressed instability, some forensic psychologists believe he experienced a dissociative episode, a rare state where the mind disconnects from the body, leaving the person acting without awareness, like an automaton. Afterward, they often recall little to nothing. The flaw in this theory: Diddy was famous for control over himself, his image, and his surroundings. For someone like him to lose that completely would require an extraordinarily powerful trigger, and investigators have yet to find it. Hypothesis 4. A deeply personal trigger and their possibility. His actions weren't caused by legal pressure or outside forces, but by something deeply personal, a private event, memory, or psychological reaction only he understood. When Judge Subramanian announced that the trial would continue, denying the defense's motion to pause, Diddy appeared to unravel. A family member shared, "He hates feeling powerless, despises it." For him, Losing control means losing everything. Perhaps, at that moment, stripped of his last shred of autonomy, he broke. Whatever the cause, personal history, social pressure, or mental instability, there's no single, clear explanation. But one thing is certain, this is no ordinary criminal case. The death of a federal judge, the defendant's inexplicable behavior, and the unsettling silence that followed have pushed the entire legal system to its limits. The FBI has created a dedicated task force to investigate. There have been no public updates, no press conferences. But according to one insider, if Diddy didn't kill by his own will, we may be looking at something we've never seen before. Part 5. Diddy in the days leading up to the trial. To understand what triggered Diddy's shocking outburst, investigators had to look backward to the isolated, hidden days leading up to the trial. Since his arrest at the end of April, Diddy had been held in a special isolation unit for over a month. No contact with the outside world, no social media, no phone calls, only brief, tightly monitored meetings with his lawyer, never exceeding 30 minutes. An insider from the prison staff revealed that Diddy refused to eat for days at a time, surviving on water alone. His sleep was fragmented, restless. Some nights, he'd wake up screaming unintelligible words, then sit panting until morning. The prison doctor noted. He didn't show classic signs of depression, but his nerves were stretched tight, like a violin string. Every time I entered the room, he'd stare at me, unblinking, like he was waiting for me to say something important. Twice, Diddy harmed himself: once, scratching his wrists until they bled, another time banging his forehead against the wall. Both times, he refused medical attention. During a cell inspection on May 29, guards found a piece of paper hidden under his pillow, a few lines scrawled in messy handwriting. "They won't let me live. They don't need me to speak up. If I stay silent, they leave me alone. If I talk, they erase me." The note was collected as evidence of his mental state. An FBI analyst observed, "Those words reflect someone who feels hunted, but it's unclear who he's talking about. The legal system, old enemies, something else." Diddy was never one to crumble under pressure. He had survived massive scandals before, from the death of Notorious B.I.G. to nightclub altercations with rapper Drake. But this was different. This time, the legal system had him with digital evidence and dozens of witnesses cornered. A former bodyguard, loyal for over 15 years, said he used to control everything: meetings, parties, contracts. But in the last 2 years, he was away from the spotlight. I'd find him alone in the studio, staring at the wall for hours. Family noticed the change too. His younger brother, Justin, recalled a 3 a.m. phone call where Diddy asked, "Do you think people can control minds?" At first, Justin thought he was drunk until he heard the fear in his brother's trembling voice. In the same period, Diddy changed the locks on his studio 3 times. Though no theft was ever reported, prison records showed another alarming fact. Throughout his detention, Diddy showed little interest in his trial. He never asked to review documents, never fought the charges, rarely spoke strategy with his lawyer. It was like he didn't care about winning or losing. His defense attorney admitted, "Sometimes I think he believed, if proven innocent, he'd never leave that cell." At the same time, Diddy's behavior grew more erratic. He filled notebooks, scraps of toilet paper, and book margins with fragmented writings, paragraphs, without beginnings or ends. One confiscated page read, "When things repeat, it's not memory. It's because someone wants you to remember. I'm not myself anymore. Something's wearing my face." Many believed he was suffering from dissociative identity disorder, fractured sense of self-command, in severe neurological disorders, especially under prolonged stress. The FBI didn't rule out medication involvement either. A secret blood test on June 1 found traces of a strong sedative in his systama drug, not issued by the prison. Who gave it to him? Could it have contributed to his mental breakdown? Yet some still believe Diddy was in control all along. A former member of his communications team said, "His whole life has been a performance. Don't rule out that this was all part of his plan." Whether a genuine breakdown or a calculated act, one thing is certain. In the days before the incident, Diddy was no longer the man the public once knew. Every sign from his behavior to his words revealed a man unraveling, losing the final grip on himself. The death of Judge Subramonian didn't begin with that blow in the courtroom. It started during those sleepless nights in a cold jail cell, when Diddy quietly realized something. Only he understood. Every door was locked. Only one remained. Part 6. The aftermath of the case. The incident of Sean Diddy Combs still unresolved. Still unsettling. continues to shake the nation. The aftermath of the case, the murder of Judge Arun Subramanian by Sean Diddy Combs, didn't just rock the federal courthouse, it sent shockwaves through the entire American justice system. Less than 2 hours after the incident, the Department of Justice urgently issued a directive to suspend all ongoing trials involving individuals or organizations connected to the entertainment industry in the Southern District of New York. This was an unprecedented move. By midday, the media began to pick up the story, but what the public saw was just the surface. Leaked images showed police sealing off the courthouse, a body carried out on a stretcher, covered by a white sheet, and Diddy being escorted away, his face blank and unreadable. Inside the courthouse, time seemed to freeze. Legal staff, both seasoned and new, stood silently in the once familiar hallways that now felt foreign. Judge Arun Subramanian, widely respected as a defender of justice, was confirmed dead at the scene. Apart from a severe head injury, he sustained no other fatal wounds. The initial forensic report concluded he died from complex traumatic brain injury, leading to massive bleeding and cardiac arrest within minutes. There was no chance to intervene or save him. What made the tragedy even more painful was that Judge Subramanian died while doing his job, presiding over a trial considered a textbook example of legal procedure. His family declined to speak to the media, but a heartfelt statement from his sister quickly spread. "My brother died because he refused to turn his back on the truth. He died because he believed in justice." Her words became a rallying cry in the national debate, not just about the case, but about how those in power react when faced with inconvenient truths. Diddy was removed from the courthouse through a secret tunnel. No official footage exists of that moment. All that's known is that he was transferred to a high-security facility in Colorado, one specially designed to hold prisoners requiring maximum isolation. His lawyer, Evan Marino, petitioned for direct contact but was denied on security grounds. Since then, Diddy has almost completely vanished from public view. No statements, no videos, no images. All media interview requests were denied. Some reports claimed he was mentally unstable and unable to recall the trial, but the FBI never confirmed this. Official psychological evaluations were classified and not shared with his defense team. The investigation later expanded to Diddy's entire network, his business partners, former assistants, and behind-the-scenes associates. From 2010 to the present, every financial account, shell company, and music contract was scrutinized. Some thought the case was over once Diddy was charged, but in truth, it had only just begun. The Department of Justice formed a special task force named Project Latch, dedicated solely to uncovering the full story behind Diddy's case. Their mission wasn't just to examine his personal actions, but to determine whether a hidden power structure existed, one that protected him, manipulated him, and ultimately discarded him to preserve deeper secrets. Political analysts warned that this case might open the door to more scrutiny of powerful figures in the entertainment world, where money, influence, and silence are often tangled in invisible webs. A veteran journalist remarked, "If Diddy was just a lone pawn, the story would have ended here. But if he's part of a larger chain, what comes next is far more frightening." The Southern District Courthouse had to close its 8th floor for nearly 3 weeks to examine the crime scene, review security protocols, and strengthen protections for high-profile officials. Sources revealed that within the first week alone, at least 18 security reform proposals were submitted. One of the most important called for more staff trained in managing psychological disorders. During trials, an area that had long been neglected, social fallout was even more intense. From talk shows to academic conferences, one haunting question kept surfacing. What did we miss? How could a defendant, surrounded by security, manage to commit murder right inside the courtroom without anyone stopping him? Many blamed the justice system for being complacent and underestimating the danger posed by a high-profile figure. Others pointed fingers at the media, accusing it of putting Diddy under unbearable psychological pressure before a verdict was even reached. Yet, many still believe it was entirely his choice. In the middle of all these conflicting opinions, one thing remains certain: Judge Subramanian's death left a painful void. He was more than a judge, he was a symbol of integrity and an unwavering belief that no one is above the law. A former colleague said, he always believed that justice has no exceptions. That belief cost him his life. Meanwhile, Diddy now carries a charge few could ever imagine: murder committed inside a federal courtroom. Once celebrated as an icon of music, fashion, and media, his name now exists in criminal files, controversial analyses, and the chilling question that lingered for weeks: If even a courtroom isn't safe, where can justice truly stand? The Sean Combs case may have faded from the daily headlines, but within the justice system and the public's memory, it remains an open wound. A federal judge murdered mid-trial, a superstar turned killer in an instant. A courtroom transformed into a crime scene. And above all, questions that still have no answers. For decades, Diddy embodied the American dreamer boy from Harlem, who became a millionaire, a producer, a mogul. But now, another image has emerged. Darker, unstable, filled with contradictions. The public isn't just struggling with the crime, they're grappling with the possibility that they never really knew him at all. Inside confidential meetings at the Department of Justice and the FBI, the name Sean Combs no longer refers to a person, it refers to a case file in a sprawling investigation where anything is possible, but nothing is certain. And that's why the case can't be closed. Despite the bloodshed, despite Diddy's isolation, despite all the sealed evidence, the investigation presses on. Financial trails, personal connections, shell companies, secret agreements, even music contracts there, all being combed through, as if each might reveal part of a much larger system of hidden power. With Diddy only the visible tip, no one says it aloud, but inside the industry, people now whisper about the domino case, because one piece has fallen, and no one knows what's coming next. For the public, it's a sobering wake-up call. They're used to seeing superstars through the lens of stages, screens, and social media worlds that are curated, edited, and sanitized. But under the harsh light of power and criminal investigation, all the illusions fall away. All that's left is a man, an act of violence, and a chain of consequences he likely never anticipated. Is Diddy a villain, a victim, or a pawn? That answer now exists only inside his Minder place. No one else can reach. His inner circle remains silent. Those who once supported him have quietly distanced themselves, and he himself now exists only as a name in forensic reports, where doctors describe his state as detached, non-responsive, and disconnected from the outside world. Justice, represented by the courtroom, was not defeated by a weapon but by bare hands. No one expected it. No one can forget it. And when the files are finally closed, only one question will still echo. Do we ever truly understand what goes on in someone's mind before they lose their grip on reality?